to our next episode of Ask the Betrayed. Sharon here,
And Ray, as always.
and today we are going to talk about boundaries. And when I thought about, oh, let's talk about boundaries, a part of me went, oh, everybody talks about boundaries. There's so much, there are so many books out there, there's so many podcasts, there's so many everything and all of that out there about boundaries. But I'm going to tell you that Ray and I learned years ago to talk about boundaries in a little different way. And so I'm going to let you talk about that real quick. And then I might pull in the story of that group that we did that very first time we did boundaries our way in person with somebody.
Yeah, I love that so much. So, yeah, when you and I met, you and I have both been doing this work for quite a long time, and we'd learned all of the things and read all the books and heard all of the kind of structure, the scaffolding, if you will, the step by steps of what boundaries were all about, how they're supposed to work, and how to introduce them to clients. And then one day you said something that really, really, like authentically, deeply, meaningfully shifted how I've looked at boundaries ever since. And that was, you said, what if instead of thinking about you do this and you do that, and I need this and I need that, and show me this and I'll be watching for that, what if instead we start with, how do you want to feel? How do you want to feel in your own life, in your own body, in your own relationship, in your own experiences? How do you want to feel? And from there, we start talking about what makes that possible. What action steps, what mindset shifts, what conversations need to happen to reach that goal of who and how we want to be in our own lives. And that stuck and it resonated. It really resonated with our clients, didn't it?
It did. So instead of focusing on the story, the narrative, and working outside of that story, we sort of flipped things around and said, let's start in the future.
Hmm.
Let's start about how you want to live. Who do you want to be in this? And it's really been magic. I'm going to use my magic wand today, I think, instead of my giraffe, but he is here. So I think that that idea really came out of some work that I did with myself. Now, disclaimer, I was a therapist before Betrayal, and we didn't really have the resources out there in the beginning of our journey that we have now. And so I made a lot up of what I did for myself. I thought about the life that I wanted to live and how did I not only defend it, but push me toward it. And I envisioned this idea. My mama grew roses. Her mama grew roses. I imagined this hedge of roses with their thorns. And I put myself in my little imagination in the center of a hedge of thorns. And I knew that I wanted to protect myself from me and protect myself from James and what other people I needed to protect myself from. You know, unless you walk this journey, lots of well-meaning folks have all kinds of ideas about what our boundaries should be, right? And really, the boundaries have to come from us. We've met so many betrayed over the years that have had such unique and just beautiful boundaries that speak to who they are and their lives. So, if you can imagine with me, this beautiful hedge of thorns. Now I have Tropicana roses on them today. So those are bright orange, beautiful roses. And and I thought about what boundaries do I need to set first of all, so that I can hold a safe space for this marriage. James and I were separated at the time. We were in a therapeutic separation. We made that up as we went along. Now we have really great guidelines and things to fill out and ideas about how to help couples through this with markers and goals. But then we just kind of made it up as we went. And so I think the number one thing was I didn't want to feel disrespected any longer. There were so many things about betrayal that hurt, but it was the disrespect, I think, that I really focused on when I was creating my little hedge of thorns. So, one of the bushes was I will no longer accept disrespect.
Mm.
And I remember living that. And I remember something happened in the grocery store or something, somebody cut in front of us. And I can't remember how old my youngest was then. And the guy kind of moved in front of us and then turned around and looked at us like, are you going to say anything? And I remember my little one saying, don't mess with my mama. She doesn't let anybody disrespect her anymore. And I thought, oh, wow, I'm really doing it. This is great. So on the outside of that hedge of thorns was this sign, do not disrespect me. And on the inside, facing me, was a sign that said, do not disrespect me.
Mhm.
And learning how to respect who I was and the life that I wanted to live was part of my journey. Does this make any sense?
Perfect sense.
I know that you've heard me talk about it before. So I thought about all the bushes that I needed in my hedge. And another one was that I was not going to let sex addiction rob me of one more minute of my life. Another bush was that I was no longer going to explain why I needed what I needed or why I wanted what I wanted. No longer was I willing to explain how life worked, how relationships should work. I needed to insulate myself in that because I was a therapist. I could see what was happening with James. I tried to be his therapist a lot in the beginning, and he couldn't hear it from me. It didn't matter what I saw. I couldn't walk this journey for him. I couldn't lead his journey for him, even though I really wanted to.
Mm.
So explaining became one of the ways that I fell down the rabbit hole. I was trying to manage him. I needed to be managing me. What a concept. You know, mother of two children, I managed everybody. And so, really looking at that focus of I need to explain things to myself, and I can say no, I can say yes, I can say I don't feel all right about what's happening, I don't like what you just said, and leave it at that. It allowed James the opportunity to seek information from other people that he could hear, that could speak to him in a way that he could understand me.
And if I can say, I feel like that also served to break a pattern of him using you to do his own work. And that pattern is not sustainable. Like,
No.
it can maintain some traction for a while because you're very good at it.
Mhm.
And he was very willing to let you take that role in his life and recovery had you been willing to serve it up and share
Yeah.
that with him. And yet that pattern would not have been sustainable, nor would it have gotten you what you wanted most from the beginning, which was to take your life back.
Yes. Yes. And for him to be as healthy as he could be. I think about all of the betrayed that we have worked with all these years, and I think about how skilled all of them become at leading that charge.
Mm, mhm,
It's part of who we are. And so here we are trying to create everything. That bush reminded me that James's journey was not mine to create,
mm,
and that my journey was. I got to learn how to live a life that was the way I wanted it to be.
mm,
The freedom that that created for me was amazing. Now I'm going to go back and remind you what we said the very beginning of our first episode. And it was like, take your eyes off him and put them on yourself.
mm,
This idea of the hedge of thorns really allowed me to stop looking at him. It didn't mean that I wasn't holding a safe space for our marriage. It didn't mean that I didn't love him with all of my heart, despite how devastated I was by his actions.
mm.
But I was not going to remain trapped by anyone else's actions. And the hedge of thorns, the ideas about how to move forward, became the cornerstones of my life, these bushes.
Yeah, yeah. Before we talk about that group that day, let me add another layer, another story to kind of materialize this for our participants, our listeners. So for me, I needed to write my own definition for a boundary because all of the imagery and all of the ones that I found out there didn't quite resonate in my own vocabulary and my own way of thinking about things. So for me, I needed to define a boundary not as a line in the sand. That was too narrow, that was too definite as I was trying to figure stuff out. It
Yes.
couldn't accommodate my confusion or my complexity at that point in time. So I needed a zone. So
Mm.
I considered my boundary to be a self-care safety zone that
Oh,
served to
love it.
differentiate between my stuff and somebody else's stuff and what did and didn't work for me.
Mm.
One of the things, if I were to figure out what was an equivalent in my life to your rose bush, I tell a story sometimes about when I first met my second husband. And we sat at dinner one night in a beautiful picturesque location. And he said to me, you know, I really, really just want to be loved. So sweet, so endearing, so lovable. My response to that was, that's really interesting because I really, really, really want to love someone. I was lonely. I missed that role of loving a partner. That was first and foremost in my mind at that moment when I met him. And it wasn't until years later I thought to myself, okay, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. I'm loving him. He's being loved by me. Where in that whole equation that I cooked up was I getting love? And I'm not going to say, I won't ever say that my husband didn't love me. What I will say is that's not the love I wanted or needed. I
Mm.
wanted a love and I needed a love that was different and better than what I got ultimately in that relationship. So for me, that boundary, that signpost, if you will, that informed that self-care safety zone was don't settle for love that is less than what you need, want, and deserve.
Mm. Mhm. So one of my bushes was don't settle as well. Stop settling. We talk a lot about how we are so programmed to accept crumbs
Mm,
instead of the whole darn cake. And when we get a crumb, it's like, oh, we're being loved, right? But we deserve the whole cake.
mhm,
And we get to craft what that looks like
mm,
moving forward. Now, I do think that I had two or three bottom line boundaries about what I would accept and what I wouldn't from James's journey. And I think it's important to say that they were based on my tolerance of how the journey would go. And I've often said to clients, this journey, your boundaries, what you are willing to take is based on your tolerance. Right? Some days you may be able to accept something different. So, like you said, your boundary zones instead of just that fine line. Think about how do you want to be? How do you want to live? And what is it that are deal breakers? One, I said, I will hold a safe space for our marriage as long as you are in 12 step, you have a sponsor, and you do everything that sponsor said. I will hold a safe space for our marriage if you are in therapy and you do everything that therapist says. And I will hold safe space for our marriage if you do not sexually betray me again. Those were my bottom line boundaries. Then my rose bush or my hedge of thorns then defined all of the nuances, all of the relational pieces of our journey, which were really important.
I have a question for you. Did you know those three things intuitively on day one? Did someone tell you or suggest to you that those would be smart and relevant boundaries for your journey? How did that play out for you?
Interesting. I knew I wanted to hold a safe space for our marriage. I knew the kind of love that I had for my husband. I sure didn't like him very much, but I loved him. So I thought, how do I allow this journey to happen? I had worked a lot in addiction, part of every therapist practice, I think. And so I knew that 12 step had to be a part of it. And I knew instinctually that the addiction was a symptom of trauma. And that wasn't who he was. And he needed a therapist to be able to work that out. I had a therapist that I loved then. He didn't have one that was great. Watch my halo. I gave him my therapist. No,
I don't think I knew that detail.
I did. And I really wrestled with it because I still was not very good at not sacrificing myself in the beginning. But I knew that he needed somebody that could hold his feet to the fire compassionately. And I knew she could do it. And I knew that I could find someone else. I heard James say to some clients the other day that in the first 2 years of our journey, we had 6 therapists going at the same time.
And I would say that's not uncommon.
Nobody could do everything. We didn't have the therapy practices that are out there now that really specialize in what we're doing. So I knew that he needed 12 step. I knew he needed therapy. And I knew that I couldn't tolerate if he was sleeping around on me while I was holding safe space for our marriage. We were still married. That was the bottom line. You got to act like it.
What I love about that story and that progression is that I hear that you made space and held space for growth. Not only the growth that you believed was possible for James, the growth you intuitively sensed was possible and necessary for you, and the growth that could happen for the two of you as a couple. Woven into that, the idea that your capacity to grow your own sense of priorities and values would also develop and cultivate and expand over time. So for you to say, I wasn't good at the beginning at not sacrificing myself, I was new to that. Is that not how it almost always plays out for survivors? We're not good at this at the beginning. We're so not good at this at the beginning, but we get better.
We do. We do. And each time I acted in a healthy way. So I used to go, okay, sick, health. Each time I chose health, whatever it looked like, whatever it was about. It became about my children. It became about my family of origin. It became about the way I operated in the world. Each time I made that choice, I felt a little better. There's this great quote from a pretty famous trauma therapist. Her name is Bethany Brand. And it says, as they were getting more self-compassion, which is what we're doing when we're choosing health, we are compassionately saying, this is the life I want to live. As they were getting more self-compassion, they were more willing to do the work. They started to feel better about themselves and recognize, oh, this is what trauma does to the brain. I do need to ground. I do need to get oriented and separate the past from the present. Now, that is just about trauma, not necessarily about betrayal trauma, but it is so true. The part of that quote that I was attracted to was when we make the choice to turn inward, to heal ourselves, to accept ourselves, to focus on ourselves, our healing has begun and it becomes easier. Should we talk about that group?
Let's talk about Kurt.
So we found ourselves with 5 women fairly early in recovery that needed help with boundaries. And you were in town, so we got to do it. I think we had 2 that zoomed in and 3 that were present. And as we were driving to the center, you were like, hey, what are we going to do today? And I'm like, I don't know. It'll come to us like we always did. And somehow we came up with this brilliant idea to help them walk through what happens when you get triggered and why you need boundaries, because we want to protect ourselves from those triggers. We want to protect ourselves from what's happening. I'm a big fan of those gigantic memo boards. And so we stunk a bunch of stickies up on the whiteboards. And we did it a little differently than the way that James and I do it in intensives now. So we asked them, let's pick some external triggers. And we did just external triggers. We didn't do internal triggers. We just did external triggers. And so one was when my husband puts his phone face down. What a trigger, right? What is he hiding? What is happening? Another was when I know my husband's lying to me, when he tells me a lie and I know that it's a lie. We were just brainstorming about all of these external triggers. And then we asked them, what is the physical reaction to that thing that's happening that we're talking about? And so off they go, talking about all of the different somatic sensations and reactions that happen in your body. Now, I know that some of you might go, oh, but wait, shouldn't feelings come first? But what we know about how our brains and our bodies work now is that we have a physical sensation first. Then we have a feeling about it, and then we have a thought about it. So blood pressure, heart rate, flush, tips of my ears get red when I'm mad, my hands clench. If I'm really mad, my foot's gonna stomp. your chest gets flushed, nauseous,
Mhm.
all of those physical sensations. Our bodies never lie to us about what's happening for us. And truth is so important. The real way for us to be able to make boundaries is to know the truth of what's happening, right? So then we wrote down all of their physical symptoms and stuff. And then we asked about feelings. And it was really interesting because it's so hard in the beginning to separate thoughts and feelings.
Isn't it? I'm gonna say it still is some days.
Mm, true, true. So we had to keep saying, oh, that's a thought, that's a thought, that's a thought. When we teach couples to have important conversations, we ask them to start with, I feel.
Mhm.
Because when we start with, I think, we're judging.
We're telling a story about how we're interpreting or understanding or positioning something. It's a perspective.
It's a perspective based on our experiences in the past.
Mhm.
So I feel cuts through all of that. I feel is what the truth is. So all of the feelings of shame and worthlessness and unlovability and trapped and helpless and unseen and unheard, all of those feelings, right? We wrote them all down. Do you remember while we were doing it? I was like, this is so cool, and I have no idea where we're going to end with this. Did you?
Uh-huh. I wrote, I mean, that was kind of the daily protocol, but yes, I remember that very clearly.
And so then I think you are the one that said, what are the thoughts, the negative thoughts that come out of this? So what we were doing was we're trying to map a path
Mhm.
for our clients to figure out how to make boundaries about how they wanted to live. And if you pay attention to the body feeling and then the feeling that you feel underneath it and the thought, you're living in the present and you're not going to get hijacked so easily by your trauma brain or, as you said earlier, your perceptions.
Mhm. Yeah, I'll often explain it this way. It's easier to separate what is pain from the past and fear for the future, and instead isolate what is today's truth. Now, today's truth might be painful and it might be scary, but today's truth is what we can work with. The past and the future, we find ourselves often working against those things or putting up self-protective resistance to avoid embracing or feeling those things. But today's truth, that's our power center.
Beautifully said. I want to write that down, but I've already forgotten. What did you say? The
PT, pain from the past. FF, fear for the future. TT, truth for today.
That is so brilliant, as usual. I love how you put things. One of the reasons why the bushes were so important in my early recovery is I kept falling out of myself.
Hmm.
I kept acting in a way that was not me. Now, I have a feisty, sassy side, but she could be so uncontrolled, and I didn't like it. It might feel good for just a minute while it was happening, but boy, that burning in the pit of my stomach, signaling to me that I was out of my own personal integrity when I set James's new underwear on fire. I'm not going to say anything else I did, but
You plead the
yes,
fifth.
those bushes kept me acting in my values.
Hmm.
Sometimes I didn't do it perfectly. Sometimes I had to make amends for my behavior, but what we wanted to help these ladies see is what their negative behaviors looked like if they let their reactions be unboundaried.
Mhm. And I'll add there, where's the choice point? Where do they become aware of what the gut feeling and the bodily sensation and the emotional components and the thoughts all combine to say and do with that information? What options are available and which option do you choose?
Sometimes in the beginning, the option comes after you've acted like a fool.
Hmm.
Sometimes for me, I would mock. I was so bad at mocking James. It was terrible. I would mock him. I was really good at it. So I would mock him, and then I would be like, oh, I just did it again. So I had to stand in that values conflict
Mhm.
in order to go, oh, I have not been present. I should have. Once I felt unloved or unseen or unimportant, once my body started to react and the tips of my ears turned red, because that always happened before I mocked him, I needed to learn to pay attention to that.
Hmm.
But sometimes we can't stop the freight train. But typically, when you find yourself in this values conflict, reacting instead of responding, that was when I could pull it back in. I got better at it and I could pull it back in faster. I could become more present for myself. I could become more present for the truth and what was really happening underneath the situation. You know, we've heard all kinds of values conflict behavior in our years together. You don't want to live like that.
Mhm.
How often have we heard this has brought out the worst in me?
Or I don't even recognize myself anymore.
And understandable.
Mhm.
What has happened is traumatic,
Mhm.
it's devastating.
Yeah. Yeah. Once you're a pickle, you don't go back to being a cucumber. Is that a Midwestern truism or what?
That I've never heard that. I love it.
Let me say one last thing on this that I feel is important. You talk about the difference between reacting and responding. So there's kind of a classic paradigm that when there's been a boundary violation, we need to respond with something that is consequential, some kind of a consequence for the boundary violation. I will just say I stopped using that word consequence years ago. Doesn't suit me, doesn't serve me, and typically doesn't suit or serve my clients either. What I prefer in terms of languaging is responsive action.
Mm.
It's present, it's purposeful, it's proactive. So when we experience that internal boundary violation of this is not something that falls within that rose bush or within that self-care safety zone, and I recognize that my values have been crossed in one way or another by myself or by somebody else, then I get to choose a response. I get to recalibrate. I get to make adjustments. I get to make course corrections. That's again where that choice point piece becomes so powerful. And I will say, I have learned a lot from times where I did something right, but the times I have learned the most are the times when I didn't do it, quote unquote, right. And I've deconstructed it after the fact, debriefed it, and said, okay, this is where that adjustment could have, should have, might have, would have, under other circumstances, eventually will be different. That's where I have learned the most when it comes to that recalibration, that responsive action.
Human nature.
Mhm.
We learn from our mistakes. So the picture is created of the mistake when we look at the aftermath of our negative behavior or our values conflict, right? Now, where are you? What has happened?
Mhm.
When I would mock James, he would crumble. I was mean. I was feeling icky. He was feeling icky, worse than icky. How is that health oriented or solution focused? How did that help us?
Mhm. How was
It,
that partnership?
it wasn't, and it didn't. So the consequence was I was feeling out of my integrity, but also victimized and like a perpetrator at the same time. Not the way I wanted to live my life.
Mhm.
So getting a clear picture of that aftermath. And then what we did was we said, what are the antidotes
Mhm.
to all of this?
Mhm.
And we had so much fun that day. They came into that group. I think we spent 3 hours with them. They came into it so scared, so broken, and they left so empowered
Mhm.
and clear about how they wanted to live their life. So the antidotes or the boundaries, they can be just about anything. For me, being ugly was not okay.
Mhm.
I wanted to stop being ugly, no matter how much he'd hurt me.
Mhm.
That was on him. I think that one of the most common antidotes that we put in the top 5 over time is slow down.
Mhm.
Boy,
Pause.
push pause. Once you get in an argument, once things start firing, boy, you just like all you can think of is more, more, more.
Mhm.
And to slow down, to give yourself a moment, to really see what's happening, to pull yourself back in the present, to do a little tapping, to put your hand on your heart, your hand on your belly, and take a deep breath. What am I really reacting to? What do I really need to say here? What do I really need to do here? That group turned into our trigger resolution process.
Mhm.
And I'll have James put it in the comments. We have a little printout, and you can use it to map out some of the storylines that have happened already, but also think about the things that you want to make boundaries about, or think about the triggers that need boundaries and walk your way through this. And sometimes, like Ray and I have said, you have to do a little autopsy
Mhm. Mhm.
because you didn't do it perfectly. And this is a great tool to use that way as well.
Yeah. And it's a really great opportunity to ask someone you know, love, and trust, and who you know loves and trusts you to get additional perspective. It's never the same. And I will say it's never as valuable as your internal information, but it is an additional vantage point to help you round out your awareness of what may be going on, what your choices might be. I can't tell you how many times in a kind of narrow, blindered sort of way, I see only one or two solutions. Like it's that binary approach that if it's either good or bad, it's yes or it's no, or it's now or it's never, right? And we're really good at that. That's a very natural byproduct of trauma. But when someone else can say, maybe there is a third option, or maybe there is a less extreme option, or maybe there is a concurrent hybrid option, that helps so much. And it cultivates in me, perhaps the next time I'm presented with a similar option, will I also see that third or non-binary option that I didn't see before?
Mhm. Choices.
Choices.
We have so many choices.
Mm.
Sometimes none of them are good.
Yeah, they're not always feel
We don't
good.
like them, right?
Yeah.
But for us to know that as betrayed, as trauma survivors. Someone tried to take our choices away from us.
Mhm.
Circumstances tried to take our choices away from us.
Mhm.
And we laid out our choices and we lived from them.
Mhm.
I just noticed something behind me.
I still love that. I will always love that.
So this was a gift from Ray. It says, as soon as I saw you, I knew an adventure was going to happen,
Mhm.
stated by the famous Winnie the Pooh.
Mhm.
And I definitely think that this podcast is going to be a grand adventure, my friend.
I'm just realizing I think I need a copy of that printed and hung on the wall in my new office.
Excellent. So if you liked what you saw, give us a thumbs up. Please comment. If you have one, you can email us at askthebetrayed@gmail.com. Next week, watch Ask the Unfaithful. James and Sam will be bringing you some form of their fabulous wisdom, and hit the subscribe button.
We will see you same time, same place 2 weeks from now.
Thank you.